Flours. Flour is produced when grain kernels are milled or ground into a powder. Grains are grasses that bear edible seeds. Corn, rice, and wheat are the most significant grains for human consumption, but the most frequently used, and therefore the most important ingredient in the bake shop, is wheat flour. Flour provides bulk and structure to baked goods. Some flours are used to thicken liquids in items such as custards and pie fillings, or to prevent foods from sticking during preparation and baking. Wheat flour is produced by milling wheat kernels or berries from one of the numerous varieties of common wheat. A wheat kernel has a hard outer covering called bran, a valuable source of dietary fiber. Bran is composed of 7 layers that envelope and protect the endosperm. Composed of 50 to 75% starch and 8 to 18% protein, the endosperm supplies energy to the plant as it grows. The innermost part is the germ, which contains fat and serves as the wheat seed. Let's take a look at this. There we go. The germ is here, endosperm, the bran, and this is the wheat plant itself from the root, the stem, and the kernels are up here. During milling, the endosperm is separated from the bran and the germ and is gradually reduced in particle size. Please watch the videos on milling that have been attached to this unit. Originally, the wheat kernels were ground between two grooved stones, and I have a video of that process that's only about 2 minutes long in there as well. Okay, so you get to see that process while working through that. Flour consists primarily of 5 nutrients: fats, minerals, moisture, starches, and proteins. Fats and minerals each generally account for less than 1% of the flour's content. Minerals are found in higher concentrations in the bran and the outer part of the endosperm. Ash is an indicator of the degree of the flour milling. Ash content is determined by burning a sample of flour and weighing the remains. Because minerals resist burning, this process gives a good indication of the mineral content. The higher the ash content, the darker the flour. Artisan bakers often seek flours with a higher ash content. Conventional bakers look for a lower ash content. Flour in order to produce baked goods that are white in color. The moisture content of flour is relatively low when packaged. It cannot exceed 14% under government standards. Actual moisture content varies depending on the climatic conditions and the storage. However, in damp areas, flours absorb moisture from the atmosphere. Starches constitute 63 to 77% of flour and are necessary for the absorption of moisture during baking. This process, known as gelatinization, occurs primarily at temperatures above 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Starches that are damaged during milling, although usually a fraction of the starch percent, are converted to sugar when moistened, thus providing food for yeast during fermentation. Gums primarily are another component of carbohydrates in flour. Though gums constitute a small percentage of flour, 2 to 3%, they are important because they can absorb up to 10 times their weight in water, enhancing strength and structure in a batter or dough. Gums are a good source of soluble fiber. Protein accounts for between 6 to 18% of flour. These proteins are of crucial importance because of their gluten-forming potential. Gluten is the tough rubbery substance created when wheat flour is mixed with water. Flour does not contain gluten, only a dough or batter can contain gluten. The proteins responsible for gluten fermentation are glutenin and gliadin. They represent about 80% of the protein in flour. Gluten is produced when glutenin and gliadin are moistened and manipulated, as when they are stirred or kneaded. Gluten strands are both plastic, that is, they can change shape under pressure, and elastic, they resume their original shape when the pressure is removed. Gluten is responsible for the volume, texture, and appearance of baked goods. It provides structure and enables dough to retain the gases given off by leavening agents. Without gluten, there could be no raised breads. The gases created by yeast fermentation or chemical leaveners would simply escape if there were no networks of gluten strands to trap them in the dough. The gluten strands that we're trapping in the dough, you're going to see when we break apart the gluten tests. Or if you're doing the gluten tests at home, there will be instructions on how to break it apart and take a look. Enzymes such as amylase, lipase, and protease are the remaining proteins in flours. Although they represent a fraction of the protein present, enzymes are important for the flour's performance in yeast bread. Enzymes help break down starches into sugars, allowing yeast organisms to form gas. In general, the higher flour protein content, the greater the flour gluten forming potential. In some cases, however, flour with, for example, 13% protein may perform better than one with 14% protein because the proteins in the flour are of superior quality. Patented flour has a higher quality protein than clear flour, and gluten structure formed when it is made into dough will be more elastic and extendable. In order to make a chewy product such as crusty French loaf, a flour with high protein content must be used. Lower protein flours are used for tender soft products such as cakes or muffins. Sorry, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but let's go through gums again. Primary pitosins are another component of the carbohydrates in flour. Though gums constitute a small percentage of flour, 2 to 3%, they are important because they can absorb up to 10 times their weight in water, enhancing strength and structure in a batter or dough. Gums are a good source of soluble vitamins. Here we're going to look at wheat classifications. The character of the wheat determines the character of the flour. Professional bakers pay close attention to the flour characteristics, which are printed on bags of flour and on flour specification sheets available from suppliers. Wheat is classified according to the growing season, its color, and the kernel hardness. Soft or hard depending on the kernel shape and density. Wheat has two distinct growing seasons, winter and spring. Winter wheat, grown where winters are mild, is sown in the fall and harvested in the spring. Flours made from the winter wheat usually has a median gluten strength and a protein content from 10 to 12%. Spring wheat grows mainly in the northern plains states and Canada, is sown in the spring and harvested late in the summer. Flour made from spring wheat usually has a high gluten strength and a protein content from 12 to 14%. Different strains of wheat have different color brand. Though a dark color referred to as red is more common, newer strains of wheat have been developed with a white brand, referred to as a white wheat, which some believe results in less bitter tasting whole grain products. The hardness of the wheat kernel indicates its protein content. The harder the wheat kernel, the higher the protein. Soft wheat yields soft flour with a low protein content. Soft flour, also called weak flour, is typically whiter in color and finer grained, packing, packing easily when squeezed. Soft flour is best for tender products such as cakes. Hard wheat yields a hard flour with a high protein content. Hard wheat remains somewhat gritty when milled and resists clumping when squeezed. Hard flour, also known as strong flour, is used for yeast breads. This table shows the classification and their uses. Various types of flour are created by mixing or blending flours from different classes and varieties of wheat. Cake flour is a fine white flour with a low protein content. Ground from deep within the endosperm, it is treated with a bleaching agent to produce its pure color. The bleaching also contributes to the properties of cake flour, which absorbs moisture but develops a weak gluten bond. High ratio cakes, which contain a high percentage of liquid and sugar, require cake flour in order to rise properly. Pastry flour is a low protein flour usually milled from soft red winter wheat and not usually bleached. All purpose flour is a blend of hard and soft flours and is designed for use in a wide range of food. It's readily available in quantities appropriate for small food service operations and is often labeled hotel and restaurant flour. Sold both bleached and unbleached, all-purpose flour varies widely by the miller. Large bake shops rarely use all-purpose flour. Instead, they choose flours milled and blended for specific characteristics. Most homes use all-purpose flour. Rarely do you have homes that have bread flour or cake flour, because typically all-purpose, being in that middle range of proteins, is what everybody uses for everything at home. Bread flour is milled from hard red spring or hard red winter wheat and has a higher protein content necessary to produce baked goods, with a chewy crumb and crisp crust. Artisan bread flour, milled from hard red winter wheat, is somewhat lower in protein than bread flour, 11.5 to 12.5%. This blend, now available from many mills in the United States, resembles French flour, which has high quality proteins and develops a good gluten structure so that the dough tolerates a long fermentation time that's necessary for a really good French bread. High gluten flour, as its name implies, is a blend of the highest protein content flour and is used to make bagels and hard rolls. Durum flour is made from a type of hard wheat which with an amber germ and high protein content. It's used to make noodles and pasta and blended in some crusty Italian bread formulas. We talked about these. I just did advance the slide, I guess. This list This table lists the protein contents of various uses of several common flours and can be found on page 68 of your textbook. It is a good idea to be familiar with the approximate percentages in the flours we use. You're going to see that the higher percentage of flours make a tougher, more firm bread type product, and your lower percentage flours makes a more tender cake type product. Specialty flours. Whole wheat flour is made by milling the entire wheat kernel, including the bran and the nutritious germ. Whole wheat flour, typically made from hard red wheat, has a nutty sweet flavor and brown flecked color. Products made with whole wheat flour will be heavier and denser, with less volume than those made with white flour. Bran particles cut through the gluten strands in the dough, resulting in a heavier crumb. The granulation size of wheat flour varies from fine to coarse, depending on the manufacturer. A finer grind will absorb more water, therefore it's important to adjust formulas accordingly depending on the whole wheat flour used. Though not a flour, wheat germ is often used in place of some flours in recipes for flavor and fiber. Wheat germ, preferably toasted, can be used in place of up to 1/5 of the wheat flour in a dough formula. The finished product will have a denser texture, however. Self-rising flour is an all-purpose flour to which salt and chemical leavener, usually baking powder, have been added. It is not recommended for professional use. Chemicals lose their leavening ability over time and may cause inconsistent results. Furthermore, different formulas call for different ratios of salt and leaveners. No commercial blend is appropriate for all purposes. Non-wheat flours, also referred to as composite flours, are made from grains, seeds, nuts, or beans. Corn, soybeans, rice, oats, buckwheat, potatoes, almonds, and other items may be milled into flours, but none of them contain the gluten-forming proteins of wheat flour. For this reason, they are often used to produce baked goods for those with allergies to wheat proteins. In conventional baking, composite flours are also used to enhance the flavor in breads and pastries. They are usually blended with high proteins wheat flour for baking. Be aware that substituting composite flours for wheat flour changes the flavor and texture of the final product. Some of these flours are talked about in the videos on gluten-free flours that I've added to this module for you to review. Rye flour is milled from the rye berry and comes in 4 grades: light or white, medium, dark, and rye meal. White rye flour is made from only the center of the rye berry. Medium and dark rye flours are made from the whole rye berry after the bran is removed and have the most intense rye flavor. Rye meal is the entire rye berry milled into a flour of different granulations, most often a coarse texture. Some mills refer to the rye meal as pumpernickel flour. Others use pumpernickel to describe dark rye flour. All rye flours have a warm, pungent flavor similar to caraway and a gray-brown color. Although rye flour contains proteins, they will not form gluten, so bread made with 100% rye flour will be dense and flat. Therefore, rye flour is usually blended with a high-protein wheat flour to produce a more acceptable product. Rye flour is high in the gum pitocin, and gums absorb water, so that dough made with a high percentage of rye flour tends to absorb more water and be sticky. White rye flour can be substituted successfully for up to 40% of wheat flour in a recipe without a significant loss of volume. Medium and dark rye flour should be limited to no more than 30% and 20% of the total amount of flour, respectively. Cornmeal is made by grinding a special type of corn known as dent, which may be yellow, white, or blue. When stone ground, cornmeal may be somewhat coarse in texture. Cornmeal, which contains no gluten-forming proteins, is often added to breads to lend a crunchy texture. It is also sprinkled on a baker's peel to help pizza and bread slide into a hard oven. Oats. Oats are one of the most common grains consumed in America, usually in the form of a hot breakfast cereal. Added to bread, oats lend texture, taste, and nutrition to many products. An oat groat is a whole oat kernel with only the husk removed. It contains both the bran and the germ. Steel-cut oats are goats that are toasted and then cut into small pieces with steel blades. Rolled oats are groats that have been steamed, then rolled into flat flakes. Quick cooking oats are simply rolled oats that are cut into smaller pieces to reduce cooking time. Oat flour is made from whole grain oats, often mixed into multi-grain bread doughs. Rice flour is made from the whole white or brown rice kernels that are finely ground. It contains little protein and forms no gluten. Rice flour is often used to make gluten-free baked goods. Rice flour is also used to dust hearth breads to give them a delicate crunch. Finely ground almonds, hazelnuts, and other nuts are called nut flours. Containing no protein, containing no protein-forming gluten. These flours lend a delicate taste and texture to cakes and cookies in which they are added. Because of their high fat content, nut flours are prone to rancidity, and they should be stored under refrigeration. Please read your textbook on ingredients to learn more about flours and how they should be stored. But now I've walked you through flour as an ingredient for the bake process. Next, as the slide showed, we will be going into sugars and sweeteners, but that's a whole different presentation at a whole different time. Have a good day, guys.